people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that Maria Cecchi is on the hunt for a rematch with Poland's own Laura Grzyb via the EBU. You will recall that Laura Grzyb and Maria Cecchi fought some time ago, and Laura Grzyb won a points decision. Maria Cecchi has since rebounded off that loss and secured the mandatory position by way of the EBU to fight her for a second time. There's just one problem. Laura Grzyb has other plans, where Maria Cecchi is still climbing up the EBU's ranks to get another crack at the apple. Laura Grzyb, reigning EBU champion, has set her sights on a different belt.
She's already won the EBU title and successfully defended it. Now she's going the WBC route. It appears that there is an ordered fight between Laura Grzyb and Carolina Duer of Argentina for what would be a mandatory slot, a shot at this division's WBC champion, Yamileth Mercado of Mexico.
Thus, I don't think that rematch between Laura Grzyb and Maria Cecchi is going to happen. First, we've got to look at where that leaves Maria Cecchi. Currently, ranked at number 1 in the EBU's ranked standings is former WBA bantamweight champion Shannon Courtenay.
We haven't seen much of Shannon. We haven't seen or heard much from Shannon in a while, and because it's been such a long while since she actually made 118 pounds, and because the last time we saw her she was struggling to make it, I figured she's not going to return to bantamweight. If and when she comes back, it will be north of 118 pounds, and currently she's ranked at number 1 by way of the EBU. Ranked right behind her is Cecchi, who was in action not but a few days ago in La France, opposite the ring Sigaline Lafarve, WBO champion at this weight. Maria Cecchi may end up fighting one of them.
Maria Cecchi may end up fighting one of them, either Shannon Courtenay, who hasn't fought in a while, or Cecchi, who's on the bounce after having dropped a decision to Sigaline Lafarve. That's what the future might hold for Maria Cecchi, who's going the EBU route, as far as Laura Grzyb, who's going the WBC route. She's trying to get Carolina Duer in the ring for what is a WBC final eliminator in order to crown the next mandatory challenger for Yami Mercado.
She's got to face Carolina first.
Carolina Duer, who's a lot more experienced than Laura Grzyb by and large. She sports a professional record of 20 wins with 7 losses and 2 draws.
6 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 29 professional bouts. A far more experienced fighter than Laura Grzyb, with one caveat, one drawback. She's 45 years old. Coming right off of a split decision loss to Gabriela Bouvier in April of this year, Carolina Duer, she's only actually won 1 fight in her last 6. She lost 4 of her last 6, drew in 1, and won 1. She's only won 1 fight in her last 6 fights. She's a lot older than Laura Grzyb.
17 years older to be exact. Carolina's 45, whereas Laura's 28. Very well-to-do Polish-based promotional outfit, Knockout Boxing Promotions, is doing a very good job of keeping Laura busy, keeping Laura active, and lining her up for the next chapter, the next step, the next phase in her career. World title honors. If she can make it past Carolina Duer, and I think she can, next stop, Yamileth Mercado, reigning WBC champion.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Laura has had an interesting run as a professional. She started out with Timex Boxing Promotions, yet another well-to-do Polish-based promotional outfit. They used to promote reigning WBO super featherweight champion Eva Brotnicka alongside Laura Grzyb.
But things weren't working out between Laura and the people over there at Timex, and she decided to jump ship. She decided to go her own way. She eventually paired up with the people over there at Knockout Boxing Promotions, who are a well-to-do promotional outfit in Poland. They promote reigning WBC Bridgerweight champion Lukas Rozenski, among several other familiar Polish fighters. She's one among them, and she's been there ever since. They have been doing right by her, keeping her busy and keeping her active. So we'll see if this fight materializes for Laura Grzyb.
She comes one step closer to challenging for the WBC title.
In men's super middleweight news, Andre Rosier hits back at those ripping Andrade's gas tank, saying his conditioning was fantastic. Benavidez is a machine.
Some people feel that Andrade unraveling as quickly as he did was a byproduct of all the fights that he circumvented all these years, that he may have been around a long time.
He's been a champion at 2 weights, campaigned in 3, but in spite of that, he never fought anybody good at those 3 weights, and the moment that he did, well, you saw what happened. Fans have lambasted Andrade for huffing and puffing in between rounds. Rosier, however, came to his fighter's defense, as he's expected to, from his point of view. Instead of chastising and ripping his efforts, fans should simply look at the relentless work ethic of Benavidez for the real reason why Andrade's energy faded so quickly. I think his conditioning was fantastic, said Rosier, when asked what happened during preparation. We had a marvelous training camp. You couldn't ask for better. I think it was just the force of Benavidez coming and the pressure. And he is a machine, and it's a lot to deal with.
It might be, but Caleb Plant, who shared the ring with that same David Benavidez, even though he lost, he was able to go the distance, and he didn't quit on his stool, quit in his corner like Demetrius Andrade did.
Demetrius Andrade, who Andre Rosier would like to see go back down to 160, go back down to middleweight. A novel proposition, since it was universally felt that after all these years, Demetrius, who's in his mid-30s, he likely can't make middleweight anymore. In spite of that, Andre says, I'd like to see him make an attempt to go back to 160. Rosier told BoxingScene.com during a recent interview, if Arislandi Lara can come up from 54 at age 40 plus and be a world champion, I know Boo Boo can wreck the division, but
Lara was moving up, which is natural.
Yeah.
As a fighter ages,
yeah,
making a particular weight can be hard to make, and after many years at 154, Lara moving to 160
is not the same as Demetrius moving down to 160. And I thought the reason he didn't have no time for no Yanni Beck Alim Kanalai is because he had outgrown the weight, because he was going to campaign as a super middle moving forward. Is that saying that Demetrius, he just can't hack it? He can't hack it at all as a super middleweight, because after only 2 fights at the weight, what his trainer is saying is he wants him to move back down.
After just 2 fights at super middle. This is the same division that Canelo currently campaigns in. This is the same division where Canelo unified all the belts against all the champions in only 11 months, where Demetrius, after 2 fights, he's done.
And this is the guy they were hyping up for years. This is the guy that they said Canelo Alvarez was avoiding. A guy who can't hack it at 168. A guy who after only 2 fights is ready to pack it in and move back down. This is who you expected us to believe Canelo was avoiding.
I told you for some time that it's the other way around. It's not Canelo Alvarez who was avoiding the good fighters at 154, 160, 168, or 175. No, it wasn't Canelo. It was Demetrius.
And that's why as soon as he stepped up, he got shut down. As soon as he faced a solid fighter, he started to unravel. He couldn't hack it, and it didn't take very long. It didn't take very long at all. The real irony is that some of those fights, at least one of those fights that he skipped out on, one of those fights that he circumvented was a lot more winnable than the one he just had. The fight with Yanibek Alimkhanalai, who at the time that Demetrius was ordered to fight him as his mandatory challenger, Demetrius's mandatory challenger when he was still WBO champion, when he was ordered to fight Yanibek, Yanibek had less experience then than he has now. He only had a handful of fights, still a greenhorn, and what should have been and could have been a more winnable fight for Demetrius than this fight, the fight he just had with David. But Demetrius spent so much time avoiding so many fights, skipping out on so many guys, that he painted himself into a corner. By the time David Benavidez rolls around, you really don't have any other options. You don't have a choice.
There are no more Luke Keelers and Jason Quigleys to feast on.
Consider how limited and how vulnerable Yanibek Alimkhanalai looked with Denzel Bentley. And imagine that would have been Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius, perhaps, he could have won that fight because Yanibek Alimkhanalai had less experience then than he has now, and far less experience then than David Benavidez. Naturally smaller guy. Near as I can tell, Demetrius should have took that fight so that he wouldn't have ended up in this one.
He painted himself into a corner. Don't start up with the hullabaloo about Demetrius daring to be great by fighting David. By the time David became an option, he didn't have a choice. He ain't have nothing else going on.
The truth is that Demetrius was never that good to begin with. He was never that good anyway. That's why he spent so much time circumventing all the solid fighters, if not most of them, at 154 and at 160. The truth is, he was never that good anyway, and he worked hard to hide it. But after a while, he didn't have a choice. He had to shit, get off the pot.
Got the shit beat out of him for all of his talk for all these years. Push came to shove, he quit.
Now what his trainer is saying is that he wants him to move back down to 160. Can he even still make that weight? If he can, they've chased him out of super middleweight with his tail between his legs. And this is the guy you wanted us to believe Canelo was avoiding. And finally, late yesterday, it was officially announced that Devin Haney has now vacated all of his lightweight world titles. Haney is set to challenge Regis Prograis for his WBC super lightweight world title on December 9th and said that he intends to move up again and fight at welterweight to become a three-weight world champion. What I think is happening here, what's really happening here, is that once Devin allowed himself to fill out a little more, his body blew up. Not dissimilar from what we're seeing with Michaela Mayer, who used to campaign all the way down there at super featherweight, decided to move up to lightweight, and when she allowed herself to fill out,
the floodgates opened.
She realized not only could she not go back down, but she couldn't stay where she was either. I think that's what's happening to Devin as it pertains to any potential fights that he could have had at or around these weights. In reference to the Gervonta Davis fight, he said, I did everything at 135 that I could. The biggest fight for me was making the Gervonta Davis fight, and his side showed no interest in making the fight. I've outgrown the division, so now I make my quest to 140 to become a two-division champion.
Gervonta Davis is said to be not just the cash cow at or around these weights, but the cash cow of boxing.
Or the face of boxing, or whatever it is. But he made no effort to fight Devin Haney. He made no effort to get him in the ring. He made no effort before the Ryan Garcia fight or after the Ryan Garcia fight. A prophecy fulfilled. I told you many, many times, Gervonta Davis versus Devin Haney, that ain't gonna happen.
Here we are.
Now, the WBA title will go to Gervonta Davis in one way, shape, or form. He'll either be elevated to full WBA champion, or maybe the newly vacated title will be on the line in his next fight, presumably an Isaac Cruz rematch. That's what I think will happen to the WBA.
The IBF title will likely be on the line in the rumored Vasyl Lomachenko versus George Kambosos fight next year in Australia.
As it pertains to the WBO, Vasyl Lomachenko is ranked #1 with them, though if he's fighting for the IBF,
maybe Bob Arum can work it out to where both titles are on the line in the Lomachenko versus Kambosos fight, both the IBF and and WBO titles.
Ranked right behind Vasyl Lomachenko are Isaac Cruz and Denis Berinchyk. Though I don't know that we actually see Isaac Cruz share the ring with Denis Berinchyk, as Isaac is rumored to be facing Gervonta Davis for a second time in Gervonta Davis's next fight, which will presumably be for the WBA title, the full title. The landscape is rapidly changing at 135, and it's what I always told you.
I told you ahead of the Lomachenko fight. After that fight, win or lose, Devin is going to move up. He cannot continue to make 135 pounds. And even though he hung on to those titles for a little while in the subsequent weeks and months that followed, it's only a matter of time before he vacates them. It's only a matter of time before he gives them up.
The only fight that would have kept him there, I think, is the Gervonta Davis fight, because I never bought into any of that stuff with Shakur and Devin's supposed offer to him. I never bought into any of that stuff. The only fight I think could have kept Devin at that weight would have been a Davis fight, and I said many times, that fight is not going to happen, and here we are. Devin Haney now means to move up to welterweight after the Regis Prograis fight, win or lose.
Once again, win or lose, I think he's going to move up.
That means no unification match with Teofimo, no unification match with Subriel Matias, and no unification match with whoever ends up holding the WBA title. That Devin Haney stint at 140 pounds looks to be short-lived. If he wins, he means to move up to welter. Last week, Bill Haney made an appearance on the Boxing Voice, suggesting that Devin would be open to having a fight with former champion Keith Thurman at welterweight. And when you think about where Keith Thurman is and where he has been, that he's a PBC guy, he doesn't box anywhere else, he doesn't move around, and that Devin
doesn't seem to have any commitment to either Matchroom or DAZN, so if he wins, he might be free to move around. He might be free to leave.
Free to go over to the PBC and do pay-per-views with them, as I think a fight between Devin and Keith, if they made it, would be billed as a pay-per-view. It's rumored that the PBC is in fact jumping into bed with Amazon Prime, and they're going to be doing a number of pay-per-views on that platform. When you think about that, and you think about how Devin's last fight was a pay-per-view, and his next fight is a pay-per-view, he likely wants to stay there to keep making the kind of money he's been making.
It's not necessarily an accurate reflection of Devin's market value. He started making a lot of money, as soon as he jumped into bed with Matchroom, at a time when the DAZN platform was throwing a lot of money around to attract top talent to their platform.
They paid a lot of money to get him to come over, and paid him a lot of money while he was there. He kept making money when he left Matchroom for Top Rank. Those three fights, the two George Kambosos fight and the Lomachenko fight.
Now he's back at Matchroom. Beyond that, I think PBC will be next.
The people at Matchroom don't have very many ponies in that welterweight show outside of Conor Benn, who's not a champion and whose next fight may not even be at welterweight. So if it's Devin's intention to get his hands on a belt at 147...
They played with the idea of boxing Keith Thurman. I don't see Keith Thurman crossing over to Matchroom. I don't see Keith going to them, but I could see Devin going to the PBC.
In many ways, he still is a network and promotional free agent with no commitment to Matchroom and no commitment to DAZN. So if he wins,
it's what might happen. Being honest with you, I'm not interested in seeing Devin box Keith Thurman, and it might actually be better for this division if Regis keeps his belt instead of Devin taking it from him, because Regis might actually unify it, whereas Devin has no intention to. Regis said he wants to fight Subriel Matias after this.
And maybe he can, if he wins, though if he loses, it doesn't look like Devin has any intention of unifying titles at that weight, making this endeavor somewhat anticlimactic.